welcome back to Reset. This episode is one that I wish I had 6 months ago before giving birth to baby Rose. I had the privilege of interviewing so many experts in the lead up to having a baby. We covered mental health, we covered hormonal crashes, we covered nutrition, but two topics that we didn't cover, and in hindsight I really wish we did, were baby sleep and lactation. So today in the studio with me, I am so excited. I have Melissa Hayes with me, the founder of Cocoon and Cradle. She is an internationally recognized lactation consultant. She is an expert in baby sleep. She services a community of 90,000, I would say the majority mums online. And today we are so lucky to have her in the studio with us. Melissa, welcome to Reset.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, no, this is a topic that is really fresh for me right now, but I'm so excited to send it to every female in my life that is either planning to have kids at some point in the future, currently has kids, or even is just looking at how they can support a friend and have a bit of empathy for what they might be going through. But tell me, when you first became a mum, you were quite experienced in the world of kids and you thought you would be fine. Can you tell us a little bit about what you were doing for work at the time and your mindset before having a baby?
Yeah, definitely. So yes, I had always worked with kids from my very first job as a teenager. I worked in a children's play centre, and then I went on to go to university and I became a registered paediatric nurse and a registered midwife and was working in the hospital setting. And so when I did become pregnant, I was working as a paediatric nurse and I kind of felt confident, feeling like I'd always worked with babies and children and thought I was just going to have this lovely restful postpartum. And I remember getting this beautiful goodbye card on one of my last shifts at work, and it had all these comments from mainly older ladies saying how we're going to have a really nice break and I was going to be able to just put my feet up and have these long lunches with my friends, and it made it sound like this dream. And I was like, well, this sounds great. And so I kind of went into having a baby with this expectation that it was going to be really easy for me. And then I kind of felt like I'd been hit by a bus after I had a baby and realized that no matter what previous experience and training I had, none of it mattered once I was postpartum and had this little newborn in my arms.
Yeah. And I think that probably lifts a bit of a weight off so many women's shoulders when they're listening and they're like, I was super overwhelmed. And it's like, okay, if someone with your experience in the lead up to being a mum could also feel that way, like it's going to impact all of us. And I think there are so many lessons about becoming a parent that aren't really teachable. You have to learn through experience.
Yep.
But what was your biggest shock when you became a mum?
Oh gosh, I think all of it was really overwhelming. I think the part that I struggled with in particular, and I know a lot of other mums probably do too, is that lack of support as well in postpartum. I felt like I had this beautiful support during pregnancy and even for a few weeks after the baby was born, and then I feel like it just died and there was absolutely nothing. And that was really, really challenging. I had a baby who had an undiagnosed tongue tie, which I only realised 4 years down the track when I became an IBCLC myself. So a very upset baby, windy baby, different issues from that. I didn't really have a good understanding about sleep then. And so I was comparing myself to a lot of what you see on social media, thinking that my baby should be sleeping all night, should be having these 2-hour cot naps. And I had a baby who just wanted to sleep on me, who didn't want to sleep in the cot. And it just made me feel like an absolute failure. And looking back, I now know that that's absolutely normal and he's doing exactly what he's meant to be doing as a baby. But at the time, I think the feeding issues combined with the not even sleep issues, I wouldn't even say there were sleep issues. I think it was unrealistic expectations on my end based off what I had been told to believe, which I now know is completely incorrect. And I suppose that experience early on where I did struggle with a lot of different things, but particularly with sleep and feeding, that then became my passion to, I suppose, help support myself and then support other mums, and was the real reason why I started studying to become an IBCLC or International Board Certified Lactation Consultant and Holistic Sleep Coach. And I've done 2 sleep certifications now so that I could really have that experience and turn it into something positive.
Yeah, on behalf of mums everywhere, thank you. How do you recommend a new parent approaches that time in hospital where you've just had your baby and suddenly not only do you feel incredibly vulnerable, but you're being bombarded with conflicting advice everywhere you turn? Like, I thought I was going into things kind of type A, as planned as possible. It's like, you know what? I'm having a planned cesarean in a private hospital. I've been going there for the antenatal classes in advance. Yeah. I know my obstetrician. this is going to be fine. I know what, like, yes, it's going to be a bit daunting, but like the environment's going to be calm. And then I guess delusional, I ended up having a planned cesarean, which it was fine, but you are like cut open on a table, you're quite vulnerable, and then you put in a room with this precious little baby, and suddenly you've got a different midwife what felt like every hour coming in with just slightly different advice. And I used to think that I was someone that would be able to advocate for myself and my needs in that moment, but I think, yeah, it's all just so new. So wasn't as, I guess, vocal as I could have been at the time, and I didn't know, it wasn't my area of expertise. So for any mum that is going into that, whatever birth plan they have, how do we trust ourselves and knowing that, yes, we're new at this, but there's this level of intuition, and how do we latch onto the advice that feels right and block out, without feeling guilty and without feeling judged, the noise that doesn't align with us?
Yeah, it is really difficult. I think everybody that I speak to has the same experience where there's such conflicting advice from literally every single health professional that you see, and then you get home and family and friends will say different things. And so it's really hard then, because I feel like, you know, sometimes those negative comments that you can get even can kind of worm their way into your brain and then leave those little seeds of self-doubt, which can then kind of expand. And so we all have this level of intuition, and I find a lot of it is cutting out that outside noise, so you can actually really lean into that, because a lot of the time it's the outside noise which is interfering with how you're feeling. I would say the number one thing is prepare early in terms of getting a little bit of education and support around what is normal. So I always suggest to pregnant mums, if they can see an IBCLC, someone like myself or someone in their area, just to have a little bit of education beforehand, because I don't know about you, but especially myself first time round, I was so focused on the pregnancy, I did not even think about postpartum.
Yeah.
And which is normal. I know a lot of mums feel that way, but if we can kind of impart that knowledge that postpartum is a long time and birth is, you know, maybe 1 or 2 days, and that we really need to prepare for postpartum, that can make a big impact on how we feel in that period as well. So I think if you have time and you haven't already had your baby, then prepare as best you can, because knowledge is power. So even understanding little things about, you know, the latch and what that should look like, that can make a big difference. And then I think having that knowledge, for me anyway, especially third time round, because I was already an IBCLC and holistic sleep coach and orofacial myologist and had all these extra trainings, I feel like I had that really good level of knowledge, then I could let a lot of that outside noise go. So I feel like if you have a base level of knowledge around normal, just what is normal, then you can let a lot of that outside noise just kind of go in one ear and out the other. I think the other big thing is finding somebody that you can trust. And so finding a professional who actually has qualifications, not somebody on a Facebook group who has no qualifications behind them, that you trust and you get along with and you align with. And then if you can have that one source, that can also be helpful, rather than kind of dotting between like Google and a podcast and, you know, a friend and a neighbor and like everybody offering you different bits of information. That can be helpful as well. And then also knowing that you're the expert on your baby. So probably in the last couple of hundred of years, especially when sleep training started, there's this big message that you have doctors who are the experts on your baby, or certain health professionals who might be the expert on your baby. But actually you are the expert on your baby. You are with them 24/7. You know them better than anybody else. And so if somebody is saying something to you, it doesn't matter who they are. If it doesn't align with you, try not to take it in, you know, try to just focus on what you feel is right, or get another opinion. So you can get, you know, second, third, fourth, fifth opinions, depending on your unique situation. And so I would just say, just keep remembering that you know your baby best. And if you do need extra support or you want some further opinions, feel free to go get them. But just remember that you're the expert on your baby.
Yeah, great advice. And in the moment, I know that can feel really tricky, but good to just try and remember. You have some amazing free downloads for people that we're going to link in the show notes. But if you could just give an expecting mother 3 pieces of lactation advice that you want her to carry with her into those early weeks, what would they be?
Probably preparing in pregnancy would be a really, really important thing if you are still pregnant, because that can definitely impact how you feel and your knowledge base in postpartum. A lot of the time we're trying to learn something that we've never done before. We've never breastfed before. Our baby's never breastfed before. And we know the optimal time for learning is not when you have just gone through like a long, exhausting labor. You're literally leaking from everywhere. You're trying to learn how to look after this new baby that you just had. And so if you can do that during pregnancy, that can help a lot. The other thing I would say is get support in postpartum as well. So like book in to see an IBCLC, myself, someone in your area, doesn't matter who, and IBCLC is a word that not many people know what it means, and I didn't until I became a midwife. So it's an international board certified lactation consultant. So actually anybody can call themselves a lactation consultant, but only IBCLCs can call themselves IBCLCs.
Okay.
And that's basically like the gold standard of lactation support and care. So it means that you're seeing somebody who's had, thousands of hours of training, done like a 4-hour exam, have to be requalified every year, has done like special lactation courses. And so if you can see an IBCLC in your area, I always suggest, I actually saw a mum this morning who booked in during pregnancy for like around the time that her baby was due to be born. That can be really helpful to get that support early on. And again, just have that one person to talk to rather than different multiple sources. And the other thing I would say is learn sideline breastfeeding ASAP, because it has been the biggest game changer for my own 3 children. And I know a lot of mums who I do it with them in their houses, and they're like, their word is game changing, which is the same word that I use, because it honestly gives you so much. It's so comfortable. It's so supportive. It gives you so much more rest. I just love it. And I find that babies mostly are very comfortable in it. They're well supported as well. I don't know if that's been your experience, but I find that sideline breastfeeding early on can really help get mums the rest they need in postpartum.
Yeah, totally align with that. It's been a game changer for us too. The more I learn about breast milk, and I just want to actually put a caveat in here that there is no right or wrong way to parent. As you said, you know your baby best. And some people choose to breastfeed. Some people choose not to breastfeed. Some people can't breastfeed. Combo fed is best, right? Yeah. So anyone listening to this, I don't want you to feel judged about your decisions. That is not the objective of this podcast. But the more I learn about breast milk, the more magic it truly seems. Can you hit us with some fun facts about breast milk?
Oh gosh, it is really magical, and actually is changing all the time. And even with research that they are doing on breast milk, every time they do more research about it, we learn something new. And so it's really interesting. And I am excited to see what they come up with, 10 years from now, when we have even more knowledge around what breast milk does and how it changes. Oh, what are some fun facts? It is like liquid gold when you first have a baby. So it is this, as you can imagine, like a gold-like substance that comes out after you have a baby in the first few days until your milk comes in, and it's packed with literally everything your baby needs. It's like this immune like super liquid that comes out that lines your baby's microbiome and does all these amazing things for your baby. It then changes into like your breast milk that you probably know now, just that normal milk that comes out. But it doesn't stay that way. It changes literally hour to hour, day to day, week to week, month to month to suit your baby's needs. So the milk that you're producing when you have a newborn is very different to the milk you're producing when you have a toddler. And so it's really incredible in that it's not the same, and it has the ability to adapt. It's actually alive. If we think of it like a live living fluid, constantly changing, evolving, adapting to what your baby needs. Even if your baby gets sick or you get sick, your breast milk changes. And I love that. And I love that whenever one of my kids has gotten sick and I've been breastfeeding, that I've been able to feed them that way, because you know that your milk is just packed with these immune cells. It's going to help them. And we know that if you are breastfeeding and your baby does get sick, they usually don't stay sick for as long or don't even catch what you have. So you could have gastro and keep breastfeeding your baby, and your baby might not even get it. Or if they do get it, they won't get it as bad. And so what basically happens is that if you have a cold right now, for example, your body's going to create some immune cells, some antibodies that are going to go through your breast milk to your baby, and your baby gets those immune cells through your breast milk, and that's what protects them. So it has so many different wonderful features. It reduces the risk of ear infections. It reduces the risk of asthma and allergies. It's like a super liquid. I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah. I remember my obstetrician told me as well that if you're breastfeeding 2 children, like say you've got a fresh baby and a toddler, literally within seconds, your body reads the saliva of your baby and knows like, okay, I'm feeding the baby now, or I'm feeding the toddler now. They have different needs, and it changes live. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? I just thought it's like this consistent milk, right? But no, it is.
No, it changes in real time. It's fascinating.
Yeah. For mums that choose, or parents that choose to feed their babies formula, whether exclusively or combined feeding, what should we be looking for with formulas?
As an IBCLC, we are governed by a code, so we're not allowed to specifically recommend one formula over another formula. I think as long as you have an age-based formula, a lot of them are quite similar. I would say unless you have a baby who has allergies or intolerances, then you can get special formula, that doesn't have dairy in it, for example, if you have a baby that's, allergic to dairy or intolerant to dairy. But when it comes to things like toddler formula in particular, I think there's a massive myth that you have to keep giving your baby formula once they're over 1. And if you are formula feeding, you definitely don't have to. So once you hit 1, there's no need for formula. You can literally stop it. Toddler formula is actually just a very big marketing ploy.
Interesting.
And so you don't have to continue formula after 1, and there's no need for toddler formula.
Okay. And if you're breastfeeding, 1 is also an okay age if you choose to stop breastfeeding then as well?
Breastfeeding is different. They do suggest, the World Health Organization suggests breastfeeding until 2 if mother and baby desire, and longer if they desire after that. But yeah, if your baby is under 1, they will need breast milk or formula or a combination of both, depending on what you're doing.
Yep.
But once you hit that age bracket of 1, you don't need to continue with the formula. But if you are breastfeeding, you can obviously continue with breastfeeding.
Okay. And now I want to talk about a little bit about stress and well-being of the mum and what that does to breast milk supply. So a little bit of a story time for everyone. When I first had Rose, we thought, okay, we have this super chill baby and we're in hospital, and she latched instantly after giving birth with cesarean. I was like, great. Rose and I are meant to be like breastfeeding buddies, and I had no nipple pain. Like, I'm very lucky, very blessed with that. But unfortunately, she was falling asleep at the boob too soon. And again, first time mum, I didn't know this. And so when it came time, I think it was day 3 where they weigh her, she'd lost 11% of her body weight. And the hospital told me 10% was kind of the max. And so then it kick-started this whole regime around, okay, well, you're in hospital for 5 days, and so we're going to make sure that you're feeding every 3 hours. You need to be expressing to up your milk supply. You need to be, if you're not doing that, then you need to top up with a bottle and use formula. And it all just got really stressful really quickly. And I ended up choosing to top up with formula because I thought, no, I know enough about myself that like the stress will probably impact my milk supply. But then that was a number of weeks, and I think it was until she was about 2 months old that we could swap to exclusive breastfeeding. And I was just like running myself what felt dry, like for those 8 weeks. And so I would be feeding her, and then Alex, my partner, is a superhero. He would top her up with a bottle, and then I'd be trying to pump and express milk, and often nothing would even come out. And talk to me about the whole mind-body experience when it comes to mums and breast milk supply, because personal experience, it was when I stopped pumping after feeding and just kind of surrendered to the fact of, you know what, maybe I'm a combo feeding family and that's fine, fed is best. Then magically my supply started to increase. What's the mind-body connection? What do we need to know? What do expecting mums need to know before entering that chaotic season?
Yeah, definitely stress has a massive impact. So stress is probably not talked about enough, but we know that stress can inhibit your letdown, which means that when you are feeding, your letdown is what actually forces the milk out of your nipples. And if you're a breastfeeding mum, it's when you take your baby off the breast, it's like a sprinkler coming out of your nipple. That's your letdown reflex. And so stress will actually stop that from happening, which is commonly why you say, you know, I go to pump and then nothing comes out. I remember different story about first time round. I had to pump, I think, because I was going to be separated from my baby, and I had to leave in like 5 minutes, and there was so much pressure, and I was like, I have to do this now, get it done, and sat down and nothing would come out.
Yeah.
And my breasts felt full, like I could feel them full and nothing would come out of them. And that's that stress just inhibiting your letdown reflex.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the time we don't think about, you know, your well-being, your mental health, you know, how stress affects that. And a lot of moms who do have a lot of stress, in particular postpartum, it can definitely affect their feeding journey. So it's definitely something to talk about, I think, with how we can, what we can do to support ourselves and reduce our own stress levels. I've actually heard of a few mums more recently who are getting mental health care plans from their GP during pregnancy, just in case they need it in postpartum. And I think that's a really good idea, because I feel like all mums who've had a baby, you know what a life-changing experience that is, and we could probably all, you know, benefit from talking to somebody. And so I feel like just even thinking about that, if you're pregnant, like, okay, maybe I'll get a mental health care plan from my GP just to have it, just to have ready, just in case I need it.
Yeah.
But then more like on a practical day-to-day aspect, I suppose, what can you do to reduce your own stress levels, you know? And that might be something you can talk to your partner about as well. If you have a partner and they know you well and they're seeing that you're a little bit stressed, you know, can you listen to a podcast like this one? Can you put some meditation music in? Can you go for a walk outside, get into nature, go for a coffee catch up with your friend? You know, do some gentle movement, anything that you enjoy and like you feel like it fills your own cup up.
Yeah.
Can help decrease your stress levels as well. And like you say, it was once you kind of let go of that stress that all of a sudden things started to improve for you.
Yeah, it was one of those classic cases of doing less is actually doing more. And so I think like anyone that is used to setting a goal and being able to achieve it, it's like, right, I want to pump 60 mils. You get nothing out, or you get 5 mils, and then you just suddenly go through this spiral of like, I'm failing as a mom. And then, yeah, it was so interesting not pumping, chilling out a little bit, catching up on some sleep, having some time outside, like everything started to adjust. I put a bit of a call out on Instagram before this episode to pull in some questions, and a couple of questions that came through around breast milk. One was around evening out supply. If we've got a priority breast and one that seems to be really full and one not, what are some simple ways to do that?
So number one, that is normal. Most mums will always have a boob that performs more better than the other. So I know, I think it's my right side has always had more than my left side. And again, like when I've talked to other mums, they've always had like a super boob, whether that's your right or your left. It seems to always be different mum to mum. So that's normal. So you don't have to even out your breasts. I would just say as long as you're offering both of them, breast milk is all supply and demand essentially. And so if you're removing milk effectively and frequently from your breast, then you've got these little cells in your breast that will tell your body to create more milk. And so always offering both sides, because what you will find is that if you do only offer one side, that will be the side that produces more milk and your other side will produce less milk. So offering both sides, but even if you are offering both sides, 50% of the time you're offering the left, 50% you're offering the right 24/7, you'll usually have a breast that just does always just produce a little bit more. So that's normal as well. So I wouldn't stress about it. And I actually know mums who have gone on to just feed from one side because their other breast has just never produced as much. And you can as well do that. Some, I know families who are like fully breastfed just off one breast. So don't stress about it. As long as you're offering both sides, your body will just work it out. And if you have one that produces more than the other, that's normal.
Mastitis. It was a word that I'd never heard about. And then I feel like I've been really close to getting it multiple times, like clogged milk ducts. And another fun fact I learned, there's not just one hole that milk comes out. There's lots of holes. Like we talked about that shower, and I feel so naive not knowing that, but these are just things that you learn as you go. But can you explain to us what mastitis is and some of the warning signs for people to be aware of?
Yeah, so mastitis basically is just inflammation. That's what it means. And it's usually when the milk is just sitting in your breast and not moving. And so common reasons that you might get mastitis if you have a baby who is not feeding effectively, and so maybe your breasts aren't getting drained and that milk is just sitting there. That can lead to inflammation. If you're doing things like putting a lot of pressure on your breast, like very tight bras, underwire bras, things like that, that can lead to mastitis. It's actually a whole heap of different reasons, and it is quite common. And what you see is that it's a spectrum where it starts with this inflammation that can then turn into infection, and that can then turn into an abscess, which is obviously not what we want to get to. But a lot of people kind of associate mastitis with infection. It's not, or it can be, but it starts as inflammation. And so what we really want to do is catch it in those early stages where you do see that inflammation before it turns into an infection or an abscess. And so if you are noticing that you have, I don't know what symptoms you've had. I've only had mastitis once and I breastfed 3 kids. I feel like I touch wood. I'm very lucky. But most mums notice that they start to feel a little bit sore in a certain area of their breast. You might notice like a very faint red patch in the early stages of getting it. You might feel like there's even a bit of a lump or firmness or just kind of a change underneath the skin on that area of your breast. It can be any breast and anywhere around your breast. It might be at the top, underneath, your right or your left. If it starts to progress a little bit, you start to feel, a lot of mums experience like flu-like symptoms, or they just don't quite feel themselves. Some mums will get fevers and go on to get body aches and things like that as well. So I guess it depends what stage you catch it in. But if you can catch it in the earlier stages, I always say you don't need to jump to antibiotics, because if it is in that inflammation stage, it's not an infection yet. And so we don't need to jump on antibiotics straight away, which is another thing that I see mums doing. They're like, I have this tiny area of redness. I've got no other symptoms, but let's just jump on the antibiotics. And, antibiotics aren't risk-free. It does change your gut microbiome and breast microbiome, and same with babies as well, because everything you has goes through to baby, and they are definitely needed sometimes. But if we can catch it early on when it's in this inflammation stage, just focusing on rest. Ice packs are a must. So get those breast ice packs that look like flowers and pop them on your boobs 24/7. Other than when you're feeding, your baby won't like that if you have a breast pack next to their face. Basically ice and ibuprofen are 2 key things. And then if you can rest, delegate any other tasks that you would normally do to your partner, friends, family, drop all the balls that you need to drop. And then obviously looking after yourself with like drinking enough water and eating the right foods. But really you just want to get on that ice, get the anti-inflammatories into you, have that period of rest, and hopefully that will just de-escalate it, and then feed on demand. So you want to keep feeding baby whenever they're queuing. You don't want to stretch feeds. You don't want to try to empty your breast, which used to be the advice that you'd like feed baby and then pump to try to empty your breast. We now know that actually then creates more milk, which actually worsens the situation.
That's good to know.
No pumping, just feeding on demand, and then just avoiding things like aggressive massage, additional pumping, anything like that that's just going to make the situation worse.
Yeah. What about mums that are returning to work and want to continue to breastfeed? How do we best navigate that?
Yeah, I actually just posted, I think 2 nights ago on Instagram, a freebie. So I have an ebook that used to be part of a paid bundle. It's like I think about 15 or 20 pages, and it basically goes through everything you need to know with returning to work. So if you head to my Instagram at Cocoon and Cradle, you'll find that there for free. But there's lots of different ways to return to work and continue breastfeeding, and I feel like you probably know yourself, you're navigating mum life with a podcast and different things. There's lots of ways to kind of organise around it. So it's not impossible. And I see a lot of mums who are messaging me saying, well, I need to wean because I'm returning to work, but you don't have to. You can, of course, if you want to, but it's not something that you have to do. And I've gone back to work 3 times now and always just fed baby on demand whenever I was at home. So when you're at home, you can literally just keep feeding whenever you want to feed. It's not like you have to change what you're doing when you're at home. And then when you're at work, the easiest way for me personally, for a lot of mums, has just been to pump depending on how long you're away from baby for. So if you're away for 8 hours, you might only need to pump once in the middle of the day, as long as you're feeding baby right before you leave and then as soon as you get home, and they'll probably have longer feeds during those times as well. But if you're away for longer than that, you might need to pump more, or if you have a younger baby who's feeding frequently, depending on the age of your child, you might need to pump more than that as well. So it is very individualised. So again, if you want extra support, reaching out to an IBCLC can be very helpful, but I would just say there's definitely lots of ways to do it. Even families have babies brought into them to work to breastfeed, so some families will do that, or they'll work from home to make it more manageable that way. So I would just say there's always ways around it if you want to continue breastfeeding, and it doesn't have to stop because you're returning to work.
Yeah. And if you wanted to wean in the lead up to returning to work, what's the best way to go around that and introducing formula while weaning breastfeeding? What does that look like?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the age of the baby. So if you have hit that point where they're 1, you don't need to replace it with anything. So a lot of mums are fortunate enough to be able to wait until, if you're able to wait until your baby's 1, then you don't need to worry about introducing anything else. Once they're 1, if you wanted to wean, you don't have to replace it with cow's milk bottles, or anything like that. Again, I see a lot of families who are giving their toddler 8 cow's milk bottles a day. You don't have to do that at all.
It's a lot of dairy to consume.
It is a lot of dairy, and actually it's not ideal because then that can cause low iron and different things that I've seen before. So you don't need to do that. If they are under 1, as we said, they either need to be having breast milk or formula. So one of those 2 things. And again, the process is probably going to vary depending on the age of baby and how much they're actually having. If you are going to be separated from baby, your baby can have a bottle or a cup as well. That's something which I feel like a lot of families don't know, is that babies can actually have a cup from birth. So if you Google premature baby cup feeding, all around the world, a lot of countries actually will give breast milk in a cup if needed to as well. So that's a good option. Otherwise, you've got bottles, you've got, normal cups, or those kind of straw cups that you'll see once baby's 6 months of age.
Yeah.
So there's lots of ways that they can still get milk when they're away from you. But I would say reach out for some individualized support so that it can be suited to the age of your baby and your situation and what they're going to need intake-wise when they're away from you.
Yeah. And I know that we discussed that milk changes different times of day and what the baby needs. If you have a great supply and you're able to pump and you can put milk in the freezer or the fridge for your baby, what are the downsides of that? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're feeding your baby and it's in the evening, they're getting melatonin from you and then it's helping to put them to sleep. But if you're pumping during the day and they're getting that at nighttime, is there any real downside, or is it still better if we can to be giving breast milk rather than formula?
I think if you have the breast milk there, I would definitely be giving breast milk over formula.
Yeah.
And then in terms of days and nights, you're right, it does change from the daytime to the nighttime. We know that overnight it's highest in melatonin, which is that sleepy hormone, which helps your baby go to sleep. And so in the daytime it's higher in cortisol, which is that more awake time hormone. If it's possible, I always say, you can give the daytime milk in the daytime and nighttime milk at night, but that's not always possible. And to be honest, it doesn't make a huge difference. Okay. So if you only have a nighttime bottle and it's the daytime, it's going to be fine. Your baby's not going to magically just fall asleep on the floor because you've given them a nighttime bottle of breast milk. and vice versa as well, you know. So I would just say we have to be really realistic with what families have and it's available to them. And so if you only have a nighttime bottle, you can use that in the day. If you only have a daytime bottle, you can use that at night. A lot of families won't even put the time on that they've pumped, so they wouldn't really know anyway. But if you are somebody who has the time on the bottle that you've pumped and you've got the availability to use a nighttime bottle at nighttime or a daytime bottle during the daytime, then that would be optimal.
Is there anything before we pivot and start talking sleep that you want to leave people with about breast milk?
Probably I just forgot to touch on earlier that latch is really important and can really make a difference with how well your baby feeds. And so again, trying to, you know, understand what a good latch looks like early on can be really, really helpful, because I find to see a lot of families who, you know, are holding their baby and their baby's lying on their back, or there's a big gap between baby and mum, or, you know, their head is really like their chin's tucked down and there's no kind of like head tilt at all. A lot of that can make a difference with how effectively they can feed and remove the milk from the breast, the mum's experience as well in terms of pain, nipple damage. So really focusing on, again, yes, side lying is amazing, but getting that good latch while you're feeding in whatever position you choose to feed in.
Yeah, that's great advice. Sleep.
Yes.
Controversial, really. You recently did a post on Instagram that I think has cracked over 1 million views on this one post, and it was talking about sleep around the world and how different cultures and countries do it. I feel like in Australia, before having a baby, I felt like it was really common to sleep train. Your baby sleeps in a cot, maybe they sleep next to you, but co-sleeping is not safe. Like, I was kind of in this bubble world, and since having Rose, I have completely shifted my thoughts on sleep. But tell me, based on that post that you did, can you just share some examples of how babies are sleeping around the world?
Yeah, I think in Australia we do have this Western view of sleep, and if you look at around the world, it's actually very, very different. So again, like you were saying, we go into having a baby thinking that they're going to be sleeping in the cot and they're going to be having these long naps and all of these different things, and then we have a baby and realize that that's most of the time not the case. If we look around baby sleep around the world, it does differ a lot country to country, but in a lot of countries, co-sleeping is very, very normal. It is what the vast majority do. There is very little accidents, very little risk of SIDS. We have other countries like, you know, in Scandinavia where they have their babies outside in the cold for sleep as well, and that works for them too. Lots of countries that have never even heard of sleep training, or when they tell their parents or grandparents about sleep training, they have no idea what that is, and they think that is such an abnormal concept. And I remember speaking to a mum who was in South America, and she was saying like that her family in South America, when she told them that her baby was waking up a couple of times a night, they're like, oh, wow, that's amazing. And then her partner who's American, his parents were thinking, oh, wow, like what's wrong with that baby? You know, you need to sleep train, you need to do this and do that, and saw it as this big problem. So I think a lot of it comes down to our expectations, and when we can really understand what is normal and maybe think a little bit less about sleep, like some other countries don't really focus on it as much as what we do, that's when we can really kind of lean into this season. And I think if we can, for me personally anyway, especially first time around, once I really understood sleep, I let go a lot of that stress, and my whole experience of postpartum changed. My baby was still waking the same amount, but I actually just enjoyed myself so much more, especially third time around. My baby was the most wakeful baby out of all of them, and I was the most rested because we co-slept from day dot. And so even though she was waking more, I wasn't getting out of bed, I wasn't sitting up in bed, I wasn't like changing the nappy every 2 hours. You know, we would just literally like, she would wake up, she'd roll over, we would feed, and everyone would just go back to sleep. And so there's definitely different ways that sleep is viewed around the world, but I think really how we view sleep in a Western society is quite abnormal, especially when other countries around the world hear what we're doing.
Yeah. So from a biological point of view, what is kind of normal or common baby sleep for the first year?
Yeah, definitely. So not what you expect, not what you see on social media. So for the vast majority of babies, they are going to want to stay next to you. And if we think about if we were born in the caveman days, our babies still have those same instincts to stay alive. And so the way that they stay alive is by staying next to their mum. And so if you're putting your baby down in the bassinet and they wake up, or you put them in the bassinet and they wake up straight away, it's because they've sensed that they're not next to you and they don't want to be eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. They would like to stay alive. And so they call out, they reach out because they want you. And a lot of sleep as well can come down to temperament. I always say temperament's like 90% of babies' sleep. And so if we think of temperament on a sliding scale, we have these very easygoing babies, these unicorns, unicorn babies who sleep through the night from 6 weeks, who are happy to have all their naps in the bassinet. I've never had one of these babies. I do know they exist, but I haven't had one. And then you have the babies in the middle who are, you know, a bit of both. And then you have the highly sensitive babies on the other end who very much my third child, a koala baby, will not have any naps in the bassinet or cot, just wants to be next to you, held, and they're seeking that closeness and proximity, and all are normal, just different. And so that's why it's really easy to compare ourselves to our friends' babies or, you know, the internet, because we can see what other people's lives are like. Not that the internet is true, but like if you have a friend's baby that's sleeping these long naps in the bassinet or cot and you're wondering what's wrong with your baby, nothing is wrong with your baby most likely. It's just that they're very different and likely have very different personalities and temperaments as well. And I think just understanding that it's normal if your baby wants to stay next to you as well. It's not something that you need to necessarily fix or a problem to fix. And I think that's why I stress so much less third time round, because I knew what her temperament was like pretty early on. We realised that she was this koala baby. And so we just lent into that. You know, we co-slept, we had contact naps, we did a lot of those things. And because I knew that was normal, I was absolutely fine. I was well rested. She was well rested. You know, I was enjoying life. And if she had been my first baby, I would have been an absolute mess, because my first baby was probably like in the middle of that temperament and I was still shattered. And so I think it helped. The universe must have known that she was meant to be my third baby.
Yeah, as that expectations meets reality sort of situation.
Yeah.
And so before having Rose, the term co-sleeping, I just thought that was something I was never going to do. I bought an expensive snoo, you know, those things that rock the baby to sleep. I think we used it 4 times, sold it on Marketplace. But the idea of co-sleeping is still quite taboo in Australia. And even in the hospital, when you're talking to midwives and things, they're not necessarily allowed to recommend co-sleeping, they told me. However, in the real world, I would say almost 100% of parents that I know have co-slept at some point. Why is it so taboo in Australia still?
I think it probably goes back to that sleep training culture. So if we go back to like the Industrial Revolution, they needed mums to be back in the workforce and they had nannies looking after a lot of babies at once. They needed babies to be compliant and to be in a routine and to have things done at the same time. There was a few prominent paediatricians at the time who basically said that your baby's manipulating you. You need to like not react to them if they're wanting you. And that's when kind of cry it out started, where paediatricians were telling parents to leave their baby to cry until their baby stopped crying. And we know now that they haven't self-settled. They've literally just given up on you coming to get them, basically, which is quite sad. And so that's kind of what started with the sleep training culture. And I feel like even though it's been a couple of 100 years since then, that is still very prominent, I think, in everyone's minds. So I think from that sleep training culture, that's when co-sleeping as well became quite taboo. But as you say, when we ask other mums what they're doing, a lot of other mums ask co-sleeping at some point. And if we look at the research, I can't remember the exact statistic, but I think it was about 80% of mums said that between 0 and 6 months they did co-sleep at some point. When we look at where those risk factors are, when we look at the accidents that are associated with that, it's always associated with risk factors. So we see drugs are involved, alcohol's involved, smoking's involved, people in the bed who don't know babies in the bed, unsafe sleep surfaces like a soft mattress, water beds, things like that, couches, recliners as well are not safe for sleep. There's a lot of different factors. And so when we look at actually what's happening with co-sleeping, all of the accidents have been associated with those risk factors. And if we look at co-sleeping, and I always recommend that everybody reads this book, Safe Infant Sleep by Dr. James McKenna, because it is just absolute gold, really easy to read. You can listen to it for free on Audible if you get an Audible trial, and it's going to transform how you understand co-sleeping. But we know that it's all associated with risk factors where there have been accidents with co-sleeping, and we know that if we can reduce any risk factors, if we're a breastfeeding mum, and we can talk more about this, but do all of the things that make co-sleeping safe, then it's actually very protective. And there's even been lots of cases where parents have saved their babies' lives by co-sleeping because they've realised that their baby's not been breathing, or, you know, something abnormal's happened overnight, and because they've been there right next to them, they've been able to rouse their baby. And I even remember this third time round, I felt like I just woken up, felt like my baby wasn't breathing, and I put my hand on her and I couldn't feel her, like her horizon full of her chest. And so I just instinctively started like rubbing her tummy and like waking her up, and then she woke up. But like that could have been a case where, you know, if she was in a cot in another room, I wouldn't have known that. And so you don't know. It's just one of those scary situations. So I think if we can really understand what the risk factors are and how to do it safely, and again, we can go through that today, but if you want more in-depth knowledge, if you get that book, Safe Infant Sleep by Dr. James McKenna, that's going to go through so much more and really again, make you feel really confident and have that knowledge around what is safe.
Yeah. And let's go through those steps right now, because for us as a family, again, I'll share a personal story, how we started with, it was a real evolution. I think Rose has had 8 different beds in her life. It was the snoo, which for anyone that doesn't know, it's very high tech and senses your baby's noises and supposedly rocks them back to sleep. It's worked for a number of friends. It didn't work for us. We then transitioned to a bedside bassinet, but Rose would throw her legs in the air. She would be thrashing all over the place. And then as soon as I would put her next to me, calm.
Yeah.
Back in the bassinet, thrashing her legs all over the place. And she was asleep during this. Next to me, calm. And I was like, there's just something biological going on here. So then, scared of co-sleeping, I ended up sleeping on, we've got this big foam rug kind of thing for her to play on. Her and I slept on there together for I think 2 nights in a row, and it was the best sleep we'd had. And I was like, okay, there's something in this co-sleeping. But again, I was scared because our mattress was soft, it was off the ground, all this sort of stuff. Fast forward a few steps, we now have a king size mattress that is firm on the ground. We're all in and we love it. But it is those middle of the night sleep deprived times when I think people probably just through exhaustion think, finally, I'm just gonna put him in the bed with me. I'm gonna fall asleep. If midwives and other parents are kind of keeping co-sleeping a secret and like we can't talk about how to do it safely, that's where the risk factors become really magnified. So how do we co-sleep safely?
Yeah. There's lots of different ways that you can do it, but I completely agree. If you're not talking about it, you don't have that knowledge. And that's where you see mistakes happen, is when you're just desperate in the middle of the night. You've never co-slept before. You have no idea how to do it safely. You bring them into bed with you and maybe you have risk factors which you don't even know about, and you just don't know what you don't know. And so I feel like all parents, no matter what stage you're at, if you're pregnant, if you just had a baby, if your baby's a bit older, it's really important to learn about co-sleeping, because, you know, you might never do it and that's absolutely fine. Or you might be one of those people who's sleep deprived in the middle of the night and brings them in, and then you'll know that you've already got the right setup, or it might be the plan from the beginning, and in which case you'll know about it anyway. So I feel like it's something really important for all families to know. You've probably gone through this yourself, but there are also resources. So I know the book Safe Infant Sleep, but you've got this Red Nose Australia has information on co-sleeping, and Safe Sleep 7 as well is out there as well for parents for extra resources in case I miss any today. But as you said before, a firm mattress is really important. So if you can get a large mattress, especially if you've got a partner in the bed, that's great. I always recommend king if you've got a partner in the bed, because then what that lineup is going to be your partner, you, and then baby. So your baby's not going to be in the middle, they're going to be on your side. And so a king size bed just gives you some extra space so you're not squished. If it's just you and baby, a queen or even a double, it might be fine. But if you have a partner in the bed as well, that extra space is really handy. And I know once you go king like us, I'm like, how did we ever not have a king?
I'm like, thanks, Rose. This is going to be great for the rest of my life.
Exactly.
Thank you. Yeah.
So that's important. Firm bed. You always want a firm bed. You don't want a soft bed. You don't want a water bed. You want it to be firm, which can sometimes be hard when you're trying to buy that mattress. Even if you can kind of go line them yourself, or if you're buying it online, make sure that it says firm. You can even get mattresses now, which I see are flippable. So you might have that firm side while they're co-sleeping, and then you can flip it so you can have like a softer side if they eventually leave your bed at some point.
That's fun. Okay.
That's a good idea. We always want them to be on their back for sleep still, and so we don't want them to be on their tummy. So generally what you'll see anyway, if you're a co-sleeping mum or thinking about trying it, is that you'll generally feed in that side lying breastfeeding position overnight, and then everyone will go back to sleep, but we still want baby on their back for sleep. We want a smoke-free environment, so we don't want any of the parents to smoke. We don't want any smoking during pregnancy either. We want a drug-free, alcohol-free environment as well. That includes medications, which maybe your partner takes, which could be sedating, anything like that. And then we want to do other things like have your hair tied back if you have long hair, have baby at breast height. We don't want them up against your face. We don't want any covers, pillows, blankets, toys, anything like that near them. It should basically be like a flat, clear space around them. You're sleeping in that cuddle curve or that C position when you go to sleep. So if you imagine you lying on your side, you've kind of got an arm usually up kind of over the top of their head but not touching their head. Your knees are up, and so you're actually protecting them by them sleeping next to you there. And if you try this at home, you can't actually roll onto them. I don't know if you've tried this, but I remember when I was first trying out co-sleeping, I was like, can I roll? It's like, no, you can't actually roll onto them in that position. Breastfeeding mum is really important. That really reduces the risk of SIDS and makes co-sleeping much safer as well. So they're probably some of the top things that I would focus on. I do have a couple of videos on my Instagram as well, which shows you how I physically would set it up for winter and for summer as well. So that can be good to see too. Also, no pets in the bedroom. So if you've got like cats and things, we don't want them to accidentally jump onto the bed and jump on top of baby. So just keeping them outside the bedroom is also a good idea. But they're kind of the main things that I would focus on. But again, head to those resources if you want some more information.
Yeah, that's all really great advice. And we can link to those in the show notes as well to make it really easy for everyone. And we'll link to your Instagram as well, because I know it's just so many good posts there. We talked about sleep training before, and for a lot of parents that are really struggling with their own energy levels, going back to work, things like that, there is a big push to sleep train. But recently I've been seeing a lot of headlines around, I think it was some of the Scandinavian countries, where hundreds of psychologists have signed petitions to stop advocating for sleep training and talking about the long-term impacts of the child if they go through that. And again, don't want to make parents feel guilty that have sleep trained their children in the past, but for anyone that's on the fence of thinking, do I sleep train or do I not? Why are some of these headlines coming out now, and what are some of the what's the research showing that could be the long-term impacts on children?
Yeah, I mean, from like the neuroscience perspective, we don't really have those long-term studies to say that sleep training is safe or not safe, because ethically they're not going to put a whole heap of babies in, in these studies and just let them cry till they stop crying. But for what we do see from neuroscience, we know that how babies thrive is when they're responded to day and night. So that touch, that responsive caregiving actually wires their brain and is really important for, how they grow and develop, how their brain matures in terms of like what they think is safe and not safe, attachment to you, things like that. So we know how beneficial touch is. We know how beneficial responding to your baby is day and night. So the parenting doesn't just stop during the day after the sun goes down. So I think they're starting to see all of the benefits of, how important it is with this responsive caregiving. And even though they don't have certain studies to say that sleep training is damaging, they have, I suppose, similar studies to say that they don't think it's beneficial for babies. And like what you're saying, there's now certain Scandinavian countries which are basically kind of banning cry it out, because they're saying that it shouldn't be promoted, it shouldn't be practiced. And what we spoke about earlier with those few prominent paediatricians that were recommending, cry it out and those sleep training methods, we now know that that's not recommended, but those ideas are still continuing and they're still being spread. And so I'm loving that Scandinavian countries, are actually starting to push back and say, actually, no, it's not best for babies' mental health, mother's mental health, and it shouldn't be kind of our first line of advice, I think, for new parents to just sleep train whenever there's any trouble. You also see lots of families where there's like underlying issues that are going on. Like I saw a family the other day who had, their baby had airway issues. And so it's like, you don't want to sleep train, you're going to miss out on the root cause of the wakings. And so there's so many different issues which can be underlying as well. And so that's why I think it's important, if you're in a situation where things are becoming unsustainable, reaching out to somebody ideally who's like done some sort of holistic sleep coaching program, so that they can go through the whole situation, because we know there's so many different aspects that impact sleep. And maybe you only need like one or few tweaks. Maybe it's sleep pressure, or they're getting too much daytime sleep or a nap too late to bedtime or something. But maybe there is something going on, like allergies or intolerances or airway issues or oral restrictions or low iron. There's lots of different things that can impact it.
Having extended maternity leave is a beautiful luxury that some of us have, some of us don't. What advice do you have for the mum that is going back to work after, say, 3-4 months?
Yeah, it's really tricky, isn't it? Because obviously that's so hard for any mum going back to work after that time frame. I think you're just out of that 4th trimester and, you're still, a lot of the time that exhaustion's kind of finally hit a little bit, especially because our little ones can start to wake more around that time as well. I would honestly just say, do whatever you can do to get the most rest. Like if that's co-sleeping, and you haven't previously co-slept and you can do that safely, then I would start doing that. I know a lot of families reach out and they're like, oh my gosh, I've literally tried to avoid co-sleeping for 7 months and just been up and down all night, and now we're doing it and I can't believe we didn't do it earlier, because now everyone's actually just sleeping. So, if you don't want to co-sleep, or it's not safe for you to co-sleep, that's okay as well. I think looking at what extra supports we can get. So if we can't have that longer maternity leave, what extra supports do we have in our life? We might not be able to change how our baby is waking too drastically at 4 months, but can our partners help to do like the first half of the night? Or do we have family or friends that can help out a little bit? Or can we navigate our work days so we can maybe work from home some of those days, or have slightly shorter hours, or like different conditions that can help suit your family? I think if I was going back to work at 4 months, for me personally, partner support would be a main one to try to help manage those nights, because we know what's biologically normal, and so we're not trying to change what's biologically normal. It's trying to still optimize our own rest during that time.
Great advice. Great advice. We mentioned koala babies before. I have a koala baby too. And at the start, there was, again, all this pressure and expectations, and text messages would come through of like, oh, did she nap in the cot today? No, no, she didn't. In fact, she napped in my arms or in the carrier. And I felt there was a lot of outside pressure on what Rose's perfect nap schedule should look like. And it wasn't until I surrendered to the fact that, you know what, 90-year-old me would give absolutely anything to be back here in this situation right now, having these baby cuddles. And I learnt, I'm going to have snacks next to me, fully charged phone. Like, you know, you can make those naps a bit easier. It's not possible for everyone, but for those of us who have koala babies that do want to contact nap, is it normal? How long does it go for? Like, talk me through.
Yes, it is definitely normal. And as you say, the older that I get and the older my kids get, I always think the same thing. Like, what would 80 or 90-year-old me feel? Because motherhood is always overwhelming. It's just like different levels of overwhelm I'm finding with 3 young kids. But when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I kind of almost shut my eyes and just like imagine myself being like 80 years old or 90 years old in like a nursing home or something, and then be like, you've got one moment to you know, go back to the space, and you open your eyes, and like I'm holding my oldest child's hand and we're walking through the park, or, you know, and it's just like really reframes.
You and I are both going to start crying now.
Like thinking about it, but like it really reframes it. And I used to do the same when my third was younger as well. She's almost about to turn 3, which just blows my mind because I still call her my baby. But like, you know, when it was hard and she was waking lots, you know, I would think the same. I'd be like, you've got, you know, a chance to come back to this moment in time and like look at your baby, like look at their eyelashes and their button nose and their lips, and how, you know, they just want to hold your hand and be next to you. And I feel like it does really reframe it and reframes how, you know, how we're feeling in the moment and viewing things. Yeah, so very, very normal. And as you say, some babies will need more contact than others, and that's just absolutely fine. That's just them. And I think the more children you have, you get this gift of like hindsight where you can be like, oh, okay, like this all passes. Like now my baby who's almost 3, I can't remember the last time she's had a contact nap on me, and that's kind of sad. And when I was in those days of, you know, that first year in particular, where like all of her naps, I think, were contact naps on me for the first year, and we co-slept at night time, or would lie down and have those co-sleeping naps during the daytime. So normal, especially if you have those koala babies. And I would always use it for me time. So as you say, I would always, I think I watched the whole season, the whole series of Grey's Anatomy from start to finish. Like I would always just have a TV show that I liked, or have a book that I was going to listen to or read, have snacks handy, have your water bottle, have everything I need. So I would actually look forward to that time, because I'm like, oh yes, I could
a little rest.
Like, have a little rest, especially if the kids were home on the weekend and my partner could look after the older 2, and I would just sneak off to the bedroom and lie down with my like Netflix show and my snacks and just have a little rest. And I was actually more tired when I tried to start doing cot naps with her when she was like 1. We started earlier. I can't remember how old she was, and she just did not want to borrow cot naps. And I was like, that's fine. You know what? I'm not going to stress myself out about this. We're just going to try later. And so when we started again, I think when she was about 1 and she started having a few cot naps, I was actually so much more tired because I wasn't resting anymore, because she would be in the cot and then I'd be like, oh, okay, well, I'll do the dishes or I'll do this or I'll do that. And then at the end of the day, I think it was after the first week or so where she had a few cot naps, I was like, why am I so much more tired? And it's because I wasn't lying down and resting. And so motherhood is 24/7 and you need to rest. And so I never want mums to be like, I have to put the baby down in the bassinet or I have to put the baby down in the cot because I have all these jobs I need to do. You need to rest or you're just going to run yourself ragged and be completely burnt out. And so something I've done from pretty much day dot with my first child, somebody told me this saying it was like, don't do anything when your baby is awake that you could do when they are asleep. And same for toddlers. So don't do anything when they're awake that you could do when they're asleep. And so I would do all the washing when they're awake. I would go take them with me to hang it and lie them on the ground. I would, you know, have them in the carrier while I wash the dishes. I would put them in like either on like a mat or I'll put them in a little like bouncy chair and they would watch me have a shower. You know, I would have them contact napping while I would eat my lunch, or like have them in the carrier while I would eat my lunch. And so I would never do anything. I would always do it when they're awake and not when they're asleep, so that I could use that rest time for myself. And then that really made a big difference to how I was feeling, because then when they are having a sleep, we would lie down together and I would have that kind of me time, even though I'm still with them. It felt like that chance to recharge.
Yeah, I feel the total same. And I just get really comfy on the couch and I kind of like prop my elbows up and she sleeps here and it's so cute. Another piece of advice that I'm sure works for some parents, for me and my partner Alex, we say it as a total joke now, but put your baby down drowsy but awake. It has never worked for us. Like, no, never. Does drowsy but awake work for some babies? And is it something that we should try and move to at some point?
No, you definitely don't have to. And what does drowsy but awake even mean? Like, how drowsy is drowsy? Like, how do you know what this drowsy but awake is? You don't have to. And that, again, really comes down to temperament. So if you have a very easygoing unicorn baby, you might be able to put them down drowsy but awake, and you might think you're like, have just learnt this secret trick to getting your baby to sleep. Sadly, it actually has nothing to do with what you've just done. It's literally just your baby. You haven't found like the secret answer to sleep. It's just that you likely have a very easygoing baby. For those of us who don't have those very easygoing babies, drowsy but awake is just not going to work. They're going to look back at us like, what are you even thinking of doing right now?
Yeah.
And they're just going to get upset and start screaming and crying. And so if you can get your baby down when they are not quite asleep and they're still a bit drowsy, great. If your baby doesn't want to do that, like the vast majority of the population, that is also absolutely fine and very, very normal. It's not something that you have to work towards at all.
Okay, great. Thank you. Very validating. For the mom that's listening to this episode at 2 a.m., feeding her baby and just eyes falling out of her head, what would you like to say to her right now?
Yeah, I think I would just say, like, you're doing incredible. And I don't think that we get told that enough as mums. I remember when I went to the doctors, I think for my 6-week checkup after my first, and I was trying to juggle all of the things, getting in and out the door. And this old man, after my appointment, just kind of held the door open for me. And he looked me in the eyes and he's like, "You're doing so amazing." Aww. And it made me just like get in the car and start crying, because I was like, I don't think anybody's actually told me, you know, it's been so hard and so busy. I don't think anybody's actually told me, you know, that you're doing a good job and you're doing more than enough and you're exactly what your baby needs. And just that act of him actually stopping and looking at me in the eyes and telling me, you know, you're doing amazing is just what I really needed to hear, and something that we probably don't get told enough. So yeah, for any mums who are listening at 1 a.m. or you as well, you know, with a mum with a 6-month-old, you're doing incredible. You know, you're all your baby needs, and your baby's so lucky to have you.
Yeah, that's beautiful advice. Mel, we've covered a lot today, all things sleep and lactation and expectations and mental health. But is there anything we haven't talked about that you'd love to just mention before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I think it's just, you know, I would say if you are struggling with something, I see a lot of mums who kind of struggle until they're at breaking point, like get help early, because we were never meant to mother alone. We were meant to mother within this wider community and wider village, which is how it's always been throughout history. And so it's hard. Motherhood's hard because it just is hard. Like, it feels hard because it legitimately is this hard without a village. And so I would always just say, reach out for help. Don't be afraid to ask for support. Most people, like friends and family, are happy to help. It's just that often we need to ask, but also professional support. You know, like if you're struggling with feeding, struggling with sleep, struggling with, you know, motherhood in general, just reach out for help early.
Yeah, great advice. Mel, thank you. This is an episode that I wish I had 6 months ago. I'm glad we have it now. And as always, I really appreciate you. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.